So I want to thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to introduce John.
I appreciate the time, and it's a pleasure. Thank you for those kind words. That's awesome. Good morning.
Good morning.
I had prepared information because I wanted to make sure I got everything in that I wanted to talk about. Generally, I kind of just talk off the cuff, so this is a little new for me to have a prepared statement. My life has been a deeply transformative journey. My understanding and appreciation has been molded over time. But I'm not unique. Mine is a common story that speaks to the challenges and triumphs of the African American experience, the resilience of our ancestors, and the importance of uncovering, preserving, and sharing their untold stories. Growing up in San Diego in the 70s, I was blessed with a father who aligned himself with the struggles of the civil rights movement of the time. He worked to instill in me an unwavering value in my blackness, my unique features, my lips and my nose, the texture of my hair. He understood the harsh realities of a society that may view me through a different lens. Thus affecting the value I saw in myself. His goal was to prepare me for the challenges I might face and to instill within me a sense of pride and resilience. And that word resilience is important to me because that's what my ancestors were. They were resilient. They persevered, which is the only reason I exist. Though my father tried, it didn't resonate. I didn't get it. It wasn't until I became a father myself in 1989 that I truly grasped the magnitude of my father's mission. Through the 90s, as my daughter grew older, I witnessed firsthand the impact of societal biases on her life, which allowed me to more easily interrogate the impacts on my own life. Effects I had long been unconsciously accepting as the norm. The same concerns my father had expressed years earlier, the things he fought to stop, echoed within my own unawareness and complicity. I became desperate to protect my daughter, along with a desire to instill a sense of pride in how she saw herself, the same as my father did. I also searched for ways to impact the outside world. It was during this quest that I discovered the remarkable power of understanding one's own genealogy. The history of people who came before me, acknowledging them and their plight, and sharing their stories with others. I soon realized that by delving into my family's history, I could reshape perspectives and challenge preconceived notions and narratives. Those things feeding unconsciousness of bias, pervasive amongst us all, including my discovery of my own biases against myself. Knowing my genealogy became not only a personal journey, but also a means to affect change in the broader community, using my research to reintroduce and celebrate the lives and plight of the unknown enslaved, who were the front line, the actual heroes that went unnamed, unnoticed, whose resilience ensured my very existence. However, I soon encountered a daunting truth, one that many African Americans face once they come to this place: the intentional erasure of genealogical connections and rarity of detailed documentation of the enslaved during the era of slavery, all of which presented significant obstacles for me. There was a cruel sting I felt when having to comb through the country's vast collection of historical documentation on an enslaver and their family, all in search of a moment of grace where they may have mentioned my ancestor. Following in my sister's footsteps, who set me on this path in the late 90s, I've accepted the time-consuming and often expensive task of unearthing that which is hidden, spending years piecing together the fragments of our collective history. Last year, driven by a sense of purpose, I founded the Alex Brienne Corporation, a 501c3 nonprofit named after my youngest daughter, who at age 22 was found unresponsive, placed in ICU, and given zero chance for survival by multiple neurologists. But with God's grace, she awoke hours prior to a planned disconnection of life support. Her story aligns well to that narrative of resilience, reflecting that very attribute of our ancestors. The intent of Alex Brienne Corporation is to fund efforts that shine a light on the lives of the enslaved in the communities they once called home, presenting our research through the lens and perspective of a descendant, and sharing that research with the actual descendants who it was taken from. Through these endeavors, we aim to inspire understanding, empathy, as well as inspire good, God-fearing people, now armed with information, to look in the mirror and perform a self-assessment into whether they may be unwittingly aligning to biases, just as I was, that are the result of the reverberating effects of a past time. My own genealogical journey began when I discovered that my grandfather, Mylan Mills, whom I knew well, was part of the Great Migration, leaving Texas for California in the 1930s to escape racism. My sister dug deeper and unraveled the story of Ned, my great-great-grandfather, coincidentally, the same name as the person we honor today. Common names, an added challenge to go along with the scarce and scattered documentation. Ned Mills was born enslaved in Georgia in 1830, later transported to Texas and finally freed when slavery ended on June 19, 1865, now commemorated as Juneteenth. We lose this trail at the turn of the century, no death certificate, and no census reference past 1900. The complexity of my own heritage became apparent when I realized that my last name, Mills, was simply the last name of an enslaver who owned Ned. This revelation forced me to grapple with the truth that my last name represented a legacy of oppression, yet also a legacy of resilience, reinforcing my determination to honor the strength of those who endured, like Ned, who were the front line. My journey continued as I was made aware of the fate of my great-grandmother, Eliza Mills, who succumbed to the 1918 flu pandemic and was buried in an unmarked grave in the woods behind a whites-only cemetery in Kilgore, Texas, segregated in life and death. Visiting those woods in 2004 was a profound spiritual experience for me. Walking the lightly driven path past that pristine whites-only cemetery to go into the woods behind it, I felt the presence of my ancestors who had walked that same path with the same view nearly 100 years prior. It was a stark reminder of their struggles and sacrifices. My journey continued as I learned the history of my grandmother, Annie Idell Mills, whom I knew incredibly well. We called her Nana. She died in 1998 when I was 28 years old. A descendant of enslaved and enslavers via both her mother and father's lines, her existence is the dissension from relationships enslavers had with their enslaved. Her great-grandmother, Marguerite, was a native of Africa, brought to this country and enslaved by John White and his wife, Keziah. John having a child with Marguerite, producing my grandmother's grandmother. These truths shed light on the fair skin of my father and grandmother, an attribute previously believed to be linked to Native American lineage, which turned out to be unfounded, dismissed by my own DNA testing as well. On my mother's side, my sister discovered that my third great-grandfather, William Cooper, was a young man from Baltimore, Maryland, who enlisted in the Union Navy on February 9, 1864. A courageous act. Maryland was a slave-holding state that also had the largest free African-American population in the country. So he undoubtedly knew the potential consequences of a Confederate victory. During the Civil War, he served on 4 ships, including the USS Wyalusing, which was part of the fleet that took possession of Fort Williams and recaptured Plymouth, North Carolina from the Confederacy in October of 1864. He would die in 1909 and be buried in Laurel Cemetery in Baltimore, an African-American cemetery. His service did not absolve him of segregation, not even in death. Today, Laurel Cemetery lies beneath Blair Edison Shopping Center and parking lot. You see, the cemetery was paved over in the 1950s. It's been estimated that more than 30,000 African-American graves exist today under the paved gravel. My 3rd great-grandfather's fellow white servicemen are buried across town at Loudon Park National Cemetery, a pristine veteran cemetery still today. Yet my 3rd great-grandfather lies lost beneath the undercarriage of cars parked by unknowing shoppers. Standing in that parking lot in 2021, I felt the weight of our shared history, our responsibility, and the immense value to be had in the simple act of installing a memorial marker with essential information and a name, which I consider simply the first step towards a deeper journey, the entry point towards dismantling the many reverberating effects of a past time. As we begin that journey today with this new installation, I pray that my story and the stories of countless others underscore the vital importance of knowing our history. It enables us to connect with our heritage, recognize the struggles and triumphs of our ancestors, foster a deeper understanding of our own identities, and take pride in how deeply ingrained we are in the fabric of this nation. Through this knowledge, we all gain insight into the historical forces that have shaped our nation and become empowered to shape a more just and equitable future. I see researching the enslaved as not a mere intellectual exercise. As an African American, I see it as a profound act of resistance. By unearthing, studying, and sharing these stories, the stories of people I have always honored and humanized in my heart, even without knowing their names, we reject the historical practice of erasure, refuse to be complicit, and reclaim their place in history, presenting the opportunity for our broader society to do the same. Let us recognize the transformative power of knowing. It is through this that we can deconstruct the tenets of bias and foster understanding through education. Beyond this gathering, let us commit ourselves to the arduous work of unearthing the hidden and celebrating the resilient of the enslaved. Every individual, because they were here and they matter. I congratulate you all on the work you have done here. And thank you all for your time. Thank you.